We give you our 3 best bets for week 2 of college football and tell you how you can take home a share of a $500 prize pool for free. And it all starts right now. What's up, Grandstand Bettors family? We are back here with our college football plays for week number 2. And after 2 weeks, we're 2-2 on the season. Hey, it could be worse, right? Also, our college football best bet leaderboard is also back for the season, where you can take home a share of our $500 prize pool for free. We're going to get into that in just a little bit, but first, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our college football picks all season long. And while you're at it, smash that like button if you are ready for week 2 of college football. And if you are, let's, without further ado, dive in to our 3 best bets for the week. Now, to get started, we are going to look at the number 1 team in the country, Alabama, taking on Texas there in Texas at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Crimson Tide, they're 20.5-point favorites at the moment, and the over-under for this one is set at 64.5. Now, Alabama, they're 1-0 on the season, to no one's surprise, really. They defeated the Utah State Aggies 55-0 last week and showed really how dominant that this team still is. Their defense, which a lot of people question because of the talent they lost to the NFL since last season, ended up shutting out the Aggies. Still look very good on the defensive side of the ball. They also held the Aggies to only 136 yards in that game, only letting them get 7 first downs. Now, they also held them to 2.6 yards per carry and 2.1 yards per pass play, which is absolutely insane. Yes, Texas, they're a much better offense than the Aggies, but Alabama's defense looked very proficient and well coached last week, which is going to be a huge test for the Longhorns offense. Now, offensively for the Crimson Tide, last year's Heisman Trophy winner Bryce Young started the season on the same route. Now, he struggled a little bit with completions, only going 18-28, but he had 5 touchdowns and also 100 rushing yards on only 5 attempts. Now, this as a whole, their team did a very good job running the ball, as they had 32 carries and averaged 8.7 yards per. Combined with that passing attack, this offense put up 559 yards, which is higher than the 488 yards per game they averaged last year through 15 games. But hey, it was against Utah State. Overall, the key to this offense is Bryce Young, and if the Longhorns do not have an answer for him, it's going to be a long day on their home turf. And speaking of those Longhorns, they also started the season 1-0, defeating Louisiana Monroe 52-10 last week. In his debut for Texas, quarterback Quinn Ewers threw for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns while averaging over 9 yards per attempt. Now, he did throw 1 interception during the contest, but overall he looked pretty comfortable in the pocket for Texas and should have made Longhorn fans very excited to have him for the season. The even more exciting part of this offense, though, is they still have running back Robinson. He averaged 7.1 yards per carry and had 40 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns last week against Monroe. He is going to be a key piece in this matchup this week, especially if Ewers is not able to crack that Alabama secondary. Now, defensively, the Longhorns, they had a dominant showing as well last week. They only gave up 167 passing yards and 92 rushing yards all game, which held Monroe's offense to only 2.2 yards per carry. Last season, they allowed 31.1 points per contest, which put them at 99th in college football, and they gave up 202.4 rushing yards per game. So far, it looks like they have improved this part of their defense immensely, but Alabama is on a whole nother level, let's be honest, than Monroe. So it's going to be an early good test for them. Now, based on these teams' strengths we have seen through 1 week in college football, we think this game is going to come down to 3 things: the battle in the trenches, Bryce Young versus the Longhorns' defense, and turnovers. Texas has a very good running back, but their offensive line cannot hold their own against this Alabama front 7. Robinson's going to be useless if he cannot find some holes and get some yardage. Likewise, on the other side of the ball, the Texas defensive line has to establish some type of presence early on in this one, or Alabama's literally just going to run the ball down their throat against them. Brings us to our second point, which is Bryce Young. You have to shut this guy down if you want to beat Alabama. The only team to do this so far was last season, Georgia. And sorry, Texas, your defense, although it is a little bit improved since last season, nearly not at the level of play of what Georgia's is. Now, at the end of the day, this Alabama team still looks very good on both sides of the ball and most likely is going to win the battle in the trenches. They are on a mission, we believe, in this season behind Bryce Young, and we don't see the Longhorns getting in that way. So with our first bet of week number 2, we're going to take Alabama with the points at minus 20.5 over the Texas Longhorns. Now with our second best bet this Saturday, we're going to look at the number 24 ranked Tennessee Vols heading to Pittsburgh to take the number 17 Panthers on at 3:30 Eastern. Tennessee, they're a 6-point favorite coming into this at the moment, and the over-under is set at 66.5 points. Now, Tennessee started their season with a dominant win over Ball State 59-10, which surely gave them some good confidence heading into this matchup. Their offense was on cruise control, let's be honest, all game last week. They put up 569 yards and 8 touchdowns. They had 4 different running backs score a touchdown as well as 3 different wide receivers. And last year, the Tennessee Volunteers, they held an average of 39.3 points per game and averaged 218.2 yards on the ground, ranking this team 12th in the nation. They look like they should put up similar numbers this season, and they are going to need it if their defense does not improve from last season. Volunteers, they were 90th last year in college football in terms of team defense, conceding 29.1 points per game, and they gave up 3.7 yards per rush and 148.5 yards on the ground. Their secondary gave up 3,500 yards in total and ranked 123rd in college football. Even against Ball State, let's be honest, they gave up 300 yards, and again, their secondary gave up a majority of that yardage. Now, on the other side of the field, they're going to face a Pittsburgh team that everyone, in our opinion, kind of wrote off after losing Kenny Pickett to the NFL, but they still looked very good last week and are ranked in the top 25. They survived, though, a thriller against West Virginia thanks to a pick 6 by M.J. Devonshire. With a couple minutes left in that game, they ended up winning 38-31. And this offense clearly still has the pieces to put up solid numbers this season, but there is undoubtedly going to be some sort of drop-off. For example, last season, they averaged 489 yards per game, but put up 100 less than that last week. They averaged 41 points per game, only put up about 31 last week, and even their run game has dropped off as they averaged 150 rushing yards per game last season, only put up 76 last week. To be fair to the rushing game, though, Pickett was a huge part of that as well. Now, defensively, they also looked a bit worse last week than last season. Pittsburgh gave up a total of 1,242 yards rushing. That's 88.5 yards per game last year. They gave up 190 to West Virginia last week. The one area, though, they look improved on is their secondary. They allowed 264 yards passing per outing last year, which was 113th in college football, and they managed to hold West Virginia to only 214 yards through the air. Now, with all that in mind, the 3 main factors we have for this game are battle of run defenses, the quarterback matchup obviously, and red zone defenses. Pittsburgh ranked 6th in college football last season in run defense, but they looked a lot worse this season in their first game. With Tennessee's front 7 not much better, we think there's going to be a lot more running in this game, which should chew up a ton of clock on both sides of the ball. Now, in the quarterback battle, both Kendon Slovis for Pittsburgh looked like he had a solid week, as well as did Hendon Hooker for Tennessee. But it's going to be interesting to see who has that better performance here in week number 2. Neither of these guys threw an interception last week, and the one that makes maybe that first mistake could result in a huge outcome of this game. Now, the last thing to watch for is that red zone defense. Both of these teams offensively had over 80% red zone efficiency last season, but Pittsburgh's defense had 77% efficiency in the red zone last season, which was actually 33rd in the nation. Now, with Tennessee's improved run defense and Pittsburgh most likely without that running back Rodney Hammond this week, who led the team with 129 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, we see a few more stops in the red zone, resulting in some more field goals rather than touchdowns in this game. So with all that said, we're going to take, with our second best bet for week number 2, Tennessee and Pittsburgh under 66.5 points. Now, before we get into our third best bet for the week, just a reminder, if you're looking for all of our NFL and college football plays, join us over on our Patreon page. Links below in the description, and we look forward to you joining our community real soon. But in the meantime, we have one more bet for you here for this weekend in week 2 of college football, and it's going to be on the late night between number 9 Baylor Bears taking on the number 21 BYU Cougars at 10:15 Eastern time, and the Bears are minus 3-point favorites, and the over-under of this one is at 53.5. Baylor Bears, they're coming off a 69-10 victory over the Albany Great Danes. I know, right? Who is that? It doesn't matter. They won. Quarterback Blake Sharp threw for 214 yards and 2 touchdowns, going 17-20 passing. Combined with that rushing attack, they put up 573 rushing yards in their dominant performance over Albany. Last season, the Bears, they were led by Jerry Bohannon at quarterback, but their new quarterback has looked very comfortable in this system so far. Granted, it was against Albany. Now, he connected with 7 different receivers, didn't throw a pick in that season opener, and although the offense has had some very good players, the big reason their 12-win season and Big 12 championship run last year was because of their defense. They gave up 348 yards per game last season, which was 32nd in the nation. They only allowed 13 passing touchdowns all season long. Opposing teams only averaged 3.4 yards per rush in total, and they only had 1,600 yards against them in 14 games on the ground. Now, the Bears ended up 10th in the nation in terms of defense, allowing 18.3 points per contest. The only problem this year is they only have 6 returning players between their offense and defense. Yes, they held Albany to only 10 points, but Albany's not a Big 12 caliber team, and they are especially not on the same level as BYU. Speaking of BYU, on the other hand, they are returning 19 starters this season. They were off to a great start as well, beating South Florida 50-21, and the Cougars were led by Christopher Brooks, who carried the ball 13 times for 135 yards and finished the game with 10.4 yards per attempt. Now, quarterback Jaron Hall also helped out, throwing for 261 yards and 25 of 32 on his pass attempts. The Cougars finished the game with 573 yards, and compared to last season, they look like they have not regressed much. They averaged 33 points per game last season, which was 28th in college football, and averaged 452 yards. Their offense, another huge part of their 10-win season last year, because their defense, unlike the Bears, struggled quite a bit. BYU gave up 156.9 rushing yards per game last season and 23 rushing touchdowns throughout the season. They also gave up 24.3 points per game in addition to 231 passing yards per game, ranking them 72nd in college football. Now, with how many guys they have returning on this side of the ball, there will undoubtedly be some improvement here, but given the level that this team played in week number 1, there's no major sign that that is actually going to happen this season. Now, taking in all that data, this game does not look like a defensive game to us. Both these teams' week 1 matchups ended easily going over 70 combined points. Baylor, yes, they've lost a lot of guys on their defense since last season, and BYU has weapons on their offense to expose that. At the same time, BYU's defensive problems don't seem to have been fixed, as they did allow South Florida to put up 21 points against them with 172 passing yards and over 100 rushing yards. Both these teams also had over 68 plays last week, and they pushed tempo and moved down the field very quickly. So, with all that said, our last bet on the late night for week number 2 is going to be the Baylor Bears and the BYU Cougars over 53.5 points. Now, before we sign off, we have to let you know how you can participate in that college football best bet leaderboard challenge. It's very simple. Every week, our college football free pick video is going to drop on Friday nights, just like this one did. In the comment section of that video, you can put your 3 best bets for this coming Saturday games. It has to be Saturday games. There are a few rules. That is one. Make sure you read the rules in the pinned comment. I'm going to reiterate that. You must read the rules. Now, at the end of the season, if you're in the top 3, you're going to take home a piece of that $500 prize pool. So, go read those rules and start putting your best bets in today. That's it for us here at Grandstand Bettors. As always, sit back, relax, enjoy week 2 of college football, and we'll see you right back here for week number 3.